is pure excess potential. In nature, there are no notions of good and bad. For balanced forces, both good and bad deeds are equivalent. The important thing in either case is to restore balance if excess potential arises. If you have behaved badly, became aware of it, and then started to feel guilty, I should be punished, you will have created potential. If you have acted well, become aware of it, and started feeling proud of yourself, I should be rewarded, then you will also have created potential. Balanced forces have no concept that some things should be rewarded and others punished. They simply eliminate inhomogeneity in the energy field. The payment for feelings of guilt will always be punishment in one form or another. If you do not feel guilty, then punishment might not be forthcoming. Unfortunately, feelings of pride that you experience when you have done something good will also lead to punishment rather than reward, because the purpose of balanced forces is to eliminate the excess potential of pride, whereas a reward would only enhance it. An induced feeling of guilt, that is, guilt you feel when proper people are expecting you to feel guilty, creates excess potential squared. As well as your own conscience bothering you, you also have to bear the anger of the righteous as well. Finally, the greatest excess potential is generated by people who experience unwarranted feelings of guilt caused by an innate tendency to always take the blame. In this case, there is absolutely no point in suffering pangs of conscience, because the reason for the guilt was made up in the first place. Having a guilt complex can ruin your life because you will be constantly subject to the impact of balanced forces appearing in order to eliminate the bias of guilt for imagined crimes. There is a truth in the saying, impudence is second happiness. In general, people whose conscience does not bother them are not affected by balanced forces, even if they have committed a wrongdoing. It would be great if God automatically punished all villains and culprits. Justice would prevail, and evil be overcome. Nonetheless, there is no justice as such in nature, and so, sad as it may be, the opposite happens. Decent people who have an inherent feeling of guilt are the ones who constantly face misfortune, whereas the shameless and the cynical often go through life not only unpunished, but successful. Feelings of guilt will always produce a script that includes punishment, whether you are conscious of what is happening or not. Your subconscious follows the script and makes you pay. In a best-case scenario, you will get away with a few cuts or bruises, or some kind of problem will arise. In a worst-case scenario, you could have an accident with serious repercussions. This is what the feeling of guilt does. It brings nothing useful or creative, only destruction. It is better to avoid doing anything that would later cause you to feel guilty than to torture yourself with a guilty conscience. Once you can say to yourself that you have not actually done anything wrong, it is totally futile to continue torturing yourself with a guilt complex. The feelings you suffer will not benefit anyone, least of all you. The 10 Commandments are not so much morals in the ethical sense as recommendations for how to maintain balance. It is we, with our basic childlike outlook, who have interpreted the commandments as if they were our mother warning us not to be naughty. Otherwise, she will make us stand in the corner. On the contrary, nothing is said about punishing people who get up to a little mischief. People create their own problems by destroying the balance. The commandments are simply a warning As we said earlier, guilt is like a thread that pendulums, and especially manipulators, can use to control you. Manipulators are people who act according to the construct of, you have to do what I tell you to now because you are guilty. Or, I am better than you because you are in the wrong. A manipulator tries to impose a feeling of guilt onto their charges to gain power over them or for their own self-assertion. On the surface, these people can seem very proper. In their view, what is good and what is bad was established long ago. They always say the right thing, and their actions are impeccably correct. However, in fairness, it should be said that not all people who are respectable and decent have a tendency to manipulate. The need to lecture and guide is a consequence of doubt and uncertainty that plagues a person's soul. They skillfully hide their inner struggle from themselves and those around them, lacking the inner strength that truly decent people possess. The manipulator seeks self-assertion at the expense of others. The need to lecture and control stems from the desire to strengthen their own position, which they do by belittling their adopted ward. Thus, dependent relationships are created. It would be wonderful if balanced forces could make sure that manipulators got what they deserve. However, excess potential only arises where there is tension and a buildup of energy. In this case, there is no buildup of excess potential because the ward gives their energy to the manipulator, creating a flow. As a result, the manipulator stands uncorrected. As soon as a person indicates that they are willing to absorb guilt, a manipulator will stick to that person like glue and feed on their energy. This dynamic can be avoided simply by refusing to take on feelings of guilt. You do not have to justify yourself to anyone, and you do not owe anybody anything. If you are to blame for something, then you can accept the punishment, as long as you do not get stuck in the position of the guilty party afterwards. You do not owe those close to you anything either. After all, you care about them because you love them, not because you have been coerced into doing so. This is a completely different matter. If you have a tendency to justify yourself, start letting go of it. Once manipulative individuals realize they no longer have a way of hooking into your energy, they will leave you alone. Guilt goes hand in hand with an inferiority complex. If you feel inferior in any way, it is because you have compared yourself to others. It is as if you create trials where you play the role of judge over yourself. In reality, it only feels as if you are the judge. The true dynamic works out slightly differently. If you have a natural predisposition to take blame upon yourself, irrespective of what the blame is about, it follows that you can also be found guilty and punished. By comparing yourself with others, you place them in a superior position of authority. In so doing, you are enabling others to suppose that they are somehow better than you. The likelihood is that other people do not actually believe that they are better than you, but if you have come to this conclusion yourself, you end up playing the role of judge in their name. By assuming the role of the guilty party, willingly giving yourself to the court, you are effectively inviting other people to judge you. Appropriate action is to stand up from the accused bench and reclaim the right to be yourself. No one will dare judge you if you do not consider yourself guilty. Only you can give others the privilege of being your judge. This might all seem like empty rhetoric, because if someone has a real flaw, we all know that there will always be someone willing to point it out. This only happens, though, if they sense that you are predisposed to accepting the blame for your shortcomings, if you consider yourself guilty of being worse than others, even for a second, it will most certainly be used against you. The opposite is also true. If you are free of the feeling of guilt, it will never occur to anyone to assert themselves over you. Here, excess potential has a very subtle influence on the surrounding energetic environment. These ideas are difficult to accept, and the technique cannot be proven in words. Do not just take my word for it. Try it. Power and courage also represent aspects of the guilt dynamic. People who have a tendency to feel guilty only subject their will to a person who is immune to the same tendency. If a person is in principle willing to admit guilt for anything at all, subconsciously, they are willing to endure punishment and subordinate themselves to others. If a person is not plagued by feelings of guilt, but has a need to assert themselves, then they can easily become a manipulator. I am not trying to say that the world is divided into manipulators and string puppets. I am just inviting you to observe a pattern. Rulers and leaders have a very poorly developed sense of guilt, or do not experience feelings of guilt at all. Feeling guilty is a foreign concept to cynics and other types who have no conscience. Their way of progressing in life is to wade through the slaughter and walk over other people. It is not surprising that it is often the unscrupulous that come to power. This does not mean that power of itself is bad, or that any person in a position of power is bad. Who can say, perhaps your happiness also lies in becoming a pendulum's favorite? Every individual must decide for themselves how they wish to keep their conscience clear. No one else has the right to tell you what to do. One thing is clear: indulging in feelings of guilt can only undermine your position. Boldness indicates the absence of guilt. Fear lies in the subconscious and is evoked not only by the unknown, but also by the dread of punishment. A person who is guilty theoretically agrees to bear punishment and therefore experiences fear. Brave people are never tormented by pangs of conscience, and they suffer not the slightest feeling of guilt. They have nothing to fear because their inner judge has declared that they are in the right. Quite the opposite position is true of the timid victim who is uncertain of whether they are behaving correctly or not. The victim fears being declared guilty, giving everyone the right to administer punishment. Even the faintest, most deeply hidden feeling of guilt can open the gates to punishment in the subconscious mind. A person who feels guilty theoretically agrees that robbers and bandits have the right to attack them as a form of punishment, and so they are afraid. People have learned that asking for forgiveness dissolves the excess potential of guilt, and it really works. When a person carries feelings of guilt, they hold on to negative energy, which culminates as excess potential. In asking for forgiveness, a person lets go of the energy, allowing it to dissipate. Asking for forgiveness, admitting your mistakes, praying for forgiveness, and confession are all ways of eliminating the excess potential of guilt. When a person allows themselves to be forgiven, they can let go of the accusation they originally created and then feel better for it. The only thing to be careful of is indulging in remorse. If a person goes too far in their remorseful attitude, they risk becoming dependent on manipulators who are just waiting for the next victim. When you ask for forgiveness, admit your mistake and release the potential. Manipulators will remind you of your mistake on more than one occasion, trying to reawaken your feelings of guilt. Do not react to the provocation. Everyone has the right to ask for forgiveness, once and once only. Releasing feelings of guilt is the most effective way of surviving in an aggressive environment, such as a prison, a gang, the army, or street. It is with good reason that the unspoken rule, trust no one, fear nothing, and ask for nothing, exists in the criminal world. The rule warns against creating excess potential. Guilt lies at the core of all potential that will serve you ill in an aggressive environment. In a world based on the principle of survival of the fittest, you can protect yourself by demonstrating your strength. But this is sometimes too general an approach. It is much more effective to eliminate the idea of potential punishment from your subconscious. The following situation illustrates what I mean. In the former Soviet Union, political prisoners were intentionally jailed with common criminals as a way of breaking their spirit. What happened was that many political prisoners, by virtue of their remarkable qualities, not only avoided becoming victims of harassment and abuse, they became chosen authority figures among the harder criminals, demonstrating that personal independence and dignity are valued more highly than physical strength. Many people are strong physically, but strength of character is a rare trait. The key to personal dignity is the absence of guilt. True personal power rests on the ability to remain free of guilt, and not on the ability to take someone by the throat. The famous Russian writer Anton Pavlovich Chekhov once said, "Drop by drop, I am squeezing the slave out of me." His phrase highlights his personal dedication to rid the conscience of any feeling of guilt. To get rid of something normally means to fight against it. But in the context of transurfing, there is no needle to battle or force yourself to do something. In transurfing, it is considered more preferable to renounce, that is, to choose. You do not have to squeeze the feeling of guilt out of yourself. It is enough to live by your own credo. No one has the right to judge you, and you have the right to be yourself. If you allow yourself to be you, the need for self-justification will fall away, and the fear of being punished will fade. Then, something truly remarkable will happen. No one will dare insult you. Moreover, wherever you happen to be, in prison, in the army, in a gang, at work, on the street, or in a bar, you will never again find yourself in a situation where somebody will threaten you with violence. Others may, from time to time, be subject to violence in one form or another. But because you have renounced the feeling of guilt and driven it from your subconscious, you will reside on lifelines where scripts of punishment simply don't exist.